The static is the first thing you notice when you move to Echo Creek. It isn't a sound you hear with your ears, not really. It is a feeling, a low-frequency vibration that settles in the base of your skull and hums against your teeth. The real estate agent called it the frequency of safety. She told me that the large antennae array on the North Ridge was a government project, something designed to keep the airspace clear and the weather predictable. She smiled when she said it. A smile that showed too many gums and not enough genuine warmth. But the price of the house was so low that I chose to ignore the way her eyes didn't quite focus on mine. I was looking for solitude. I was looking for a place where the mistakes of my past could be buried under layers of pine needles and silence. I thought Echo Creek was that place. I was wrong. I worked from home, or at least I tried to. My desk faces the window that overlooks the cul-de-sac. It is a perfect circle of asphalt, cracked in places that look like spider webs, surrounded by 4 identical houses painted in shades of beige and gray that suggest a desperate attempt to blend into the fog that rolls down from the mountain every evening. The routine here is absolute. At 7 in the morning, the siren from the ridge wails for exactly 10 seconds. It is the signal to wake up. At 8, the mail carrier, a man named Thomas who walks with a limp that switches legs depending on the day, delivers the post. At noon, the siren sounds again for lunch. And at 6 in the evening, the street lights flicker on with a buzz that sounds like frying meat, signaling that it is time to go inside. Nobody explicitly told me it was a rule to go inside at 6. There's no HOA handbook that lists penalties for loitering on your own porch after dusk. It is just something you learn by watching. You watch Mrs. Higgins across the street, a woman who prunes her roses with the precision of a surgeon, drop her shears, and sprint for her front door the moment that buzzing starts. You watch the children, who play kickball in the street with a silent, grim intensity, scatter like roaches when the light hits the pavement. You learn that to be outside when the sky turns that bruised shade of purple is to invite attention you do not want. I had been living here for 3 months when the broadcast started. I have an old television set, a massive box with wood paneling that I found in the basement when I moved in. I keep it for the aesthetic, mostly, a glowing retro centerpiece for my living room. It gets 3 channels. Channel 3 is the news, which seems to replay the same stories about bumper crops and local fairs from 1998. Channel 4 is static, and Channel 5 is the community bulletin, a scrolling text of birthdays and lost cats set to an endless loop of elevator music. I usually leave it on Channel 5 for the background noise. It makes the empty house feel less like a tomb. It was Tuesday. I remember because Tuesday is the day Thomas delivers the weekly circulars. I was sitting on my couch, nursing a lukewarm beer, watching the names scroll by on the television. Happy 8th birthday to Timmy Miller. Lost, Golden Retriever, answers to Buster. Community potluck this Sunday at the rec center. The text was hypnotic, green block letters on a black background. I was half asleep when the music stopped. It didn't fade out. It cut. A harsh, electronic snap that made me jump. The screen went black for a second, and then a color bar test pattern appeared. The tone that accompanied it was piercing, a high-pitched squeal that made my fillings ache. I reached for the remote to mute it, but the volume button didn't work. The bar on the screen showed the volume going down, but the sound remained deafening. Then, the tone cut out, replaced by a voice. It wasn't the smooth, synthesized voice of the usual announcer. It was breathless, ragged, a human voice stripped of all professional cadence, thick with panic. This is not a test. This is not a test. The containment on the North Ridge has failed. The frequency is bleeding. Do not look at the sky. Do not look at the windows. Seek shelter immediately. If you can hear this, you are already in the contamination zone. Lock your doors. Turn off your lights. Ignore the knocking. I repeat, ignore the knocking. The broadcast cut to static. I sat there, the remote trembling in my hand. My first instinct was to laugh. It had to be a prank. Some kids hacking the local feed, trying to scare the new guy. It sounded like something out of a bad sci-fi movie. Containment failure. Frequency bleeding. It was ridiculous. I stood up and walked to the window, intending to look out at the street to see if anyone else had heard it. To see Mrs. Higgins shaking her head on her porch, or Thomas laughing by his truck. My hand was on the curtain when I remembered the voice. Do not look at the windows. It was a stupid thought, a reflex of fear. But I pulled my hand back. I stood in the center of my living room, listening. The house was silent. The refrigerator hummed. The floorboards settled. But underneath it all, that low-frequency vibration, the static that I had learned to ignore, was louder. It was throbbing now, a rhythmic pulse that felt like a second heartbeat in the walls. I went to the front door. It has a peephole, a tiny, distorted lens that shows the world in a fisheye curve. I pressed my eye against it. The streetlights were on, buzzing their angry electric song. The cul-de-sac was empty. Mrs. Higgins's house was dark. The house to my left, occupied by the Millers, was dark. But the house directly across from me, the one that had been empty since I moved in, the one with the for sale sign that had fallen into the tall grass, had a light on. It wasn't a lamp. It was the blue, flickering glow of a television set in the front window. And standing in front of that window, silhouetted against the blue light, was a figure. They were standing perfectly still, facing my house. I pulled away from the door, my breath catching in my throat. I told myself it was a squatter, just someone crashing in the empty building. But the silhouette had been wrong. The proportions were off. The arms were too long, hanging down past the knees. The head was tilted at an angle that should have snapped a neck. I went back to my television. The static was gone. The scrolling text was back. Happy 8th birthday to Timmy Miller. Lost golden retriever. Answers to Buster. The music was playing again, that cheerful, mindless bossa nova. It was as if nothing had happened, as if the voice hadn't just screamed about containment failures and contamination. I grabbed my phone from the coffee table. No service. That wasn't unusual for Echo Creek. The cell reception was spotty at best, usually requiring me to stand in the corner of the kitchen with one arm raised to get a single bar. I walked to the kitchen and tried the landline on the wall. I picked up the receiver. There was no dial tone. Instead, there was a sound. Wet. Rhythmic. Like someone walking through mud in heavy boots. Slap. 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 And then, heavy breathing. Not panicked like the man on the TV. Hungry. I slammed the phone back onto the receiver. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I checked the locks. Front door, deadbolt engaged. Back door, slider locked with the safety bar down. Windows, latched. I was safe. I was inside. I was following the rules. I went into the kitchen to pour myself a glass of water. My mouth felt like it was stuffed with cotton. As the tap ran, I looked at the digital clock on the microwave. 8:15 p.m. The sun had been down for over 2 hours. I drank the water in one gulp. The metallic taste of the local pipe stronger than usual. It tasted like copper. Like blood. I spit it into the sink and watched the clear liquid swirl down the drain. Knock. Knock. The sound came from the front door. It was polite. 3 distinct raps, spaced evenly apart. Not the pounding of someone in distress. Not the frantic hammering of an emergency. It was the knock of a neighbor coming to borrow a cup of sugar. I froze. The voice from the broadcast echoed in my head. Ignore the knocking, I didn't move. I stood in the kitchen, gripping the edge of the counter until my knuckles turned white. Silence stretched out, heavy and suffocating. Maybe they would go away. Maybe it was Thomas, delivering a package late. But Thomas never worked past 5. Thomas limped. I hadn't heard footsteps on the porch stairs. Knock. 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 Louder this time. More insistent. Who is it? I called out. My voice cracked, sounding small and pathetic in the empty house. Neighbor, a voice replied. It was muffled by the heavy wood of the door, but it sounded flat. There was no inflection, no rise and fall of question or statement. Just a word dropped like a stone. Neighbor. It's late, I said. Come back tomorrow. Open the door, neighbor, the voice said. It sounded like Mrs. Higgins. It had her pitch, her timbre, but it lacked her age. It sounded like a recording of Mrs. Higgins played back on a machine that was running slightly too slow. "We have a fruit basket. Welcome to the neighborhood." "I've lived here for 3 months," I said, backing away from the hallway, moving deeper into the kitchen. "I don't need a fruit basket. It is fresh," the voice said. "It is local. Open the door. The frequency is strong tonight. We want to share it." The doorknob jiggled. Just a little. A metallic rattle that sent a spike of adrenaline straight into my blood. I knew I had locked it. I checked it. I checked it twice. But I watched as the deadbolt turn knob on the inside began to rotate. It moved slowly, grinding against the frame, as if an invisible hand were gripping it from my side of the door. I grabbed a steak knife from the butcher block on the counter. It felt ridiculously light, a useless toy against whatever was happening. I ran to the living room and shoved the heavy armchair in front of the door. The deadbolt clicked open with a sound like a gunshot. The door handle turned. The door pushed inward, hitting the back of the armchair. "Let us in," the voice said. It wasn't Mrs. Higgins anymore. It was deeper, guttural. It sounded like two voices speaking in unison, slightly out of sync. "The sky is so beautiful. You need to see the colors. You need to seek shelter in the light." "Go away," I screamed. I retreated to the hallway that led to the bedrooms. "I have a gun." I didn't have a gun. I had a knife and a terrifying amount of debt. The door stopped pushing. The pressure released. Silence returned, thick and oily. I stood there for an hour, watching the door. The crack where it had opened slightly was dark. I couldn't see anything through it. Eventually, my legs cramped, and I slid down the wall to the floor, keeping the knife pointed at the entrance. I must have dozed off, or maybe I passed out from the stress. I woke up to the sound of the siren. It was morning. The light streaming through the high transom window above the door was gray and weak, but it was daylight. The 7 a.m. siren. The all clear. I scrambled up, my body aching. The armchair was still in front of the door. The door was still cracked open an inch. I crept toward it, knife raised. I pushed the chair aside and kicked the door shut, throwing the deadbolt and the chain. Then I looked through the peephole. The cul-de-sac was normal. Mrs. Higgins was on her knees in her garden, hacking at the rose bushes. Thomas's mail truck was turning the corner, the engine sputtering. The house across the street was dark and empty. The for sale sign lying face down in the weeds, just as it always had. I opened the door. The air smelled of wet asphalt and pine. There was no fruit basket on the porch. There were no muddy footprints, but on the door frame, right where the wood met the siding, there were scratches, deep gouges in the paint. 3 of them, parallel, like the marks of a massive claw. Or fingers that were too strong and too hard to be human. I walked out onto the porch. Mrs. Higgins looked up. She waved her shoes at me. "Morning, dear," she called out. "Sleep well." "Mrs. Higgins," I stammered. Did you come over last night?" She laughed, a dry, rasping sound. "Me? Out after the buzz? Heavens no. My arthritis keeps me in the chair past 6. Why do you ask?" "Someone knocked," I said. "They sounded like you." She stopped pruning. She stood up slowly, her joints popping audibly. She turned to face me fully. The distance across the street wasn't far, maybe 30 feet. I could see her face clearly. She was smiling, but her eyes were wide, too wide, and the pupils were blown out, huge black saucers that swallowed the iris. "Must have been the wind," she said. "The wind plays tricks in the valley. It mimics. It learns. It said the containment failed." I said, "I don't know why I told her. I just wanted someone to acknowledge the insanity. The broadcast. It said the frequency was bleeding." Mrs. Higgins's smile didn't waver, but the skin around her eyes tightened. "We don't watch Channel 4, dear. Channel 4 is for the bad days. Stick to Channel 5. Timmy's birthday is coming up. It's going to be a grand party." She turned back to her roses. Snipping, snipping, snipping. I went back inside. I tried the internet again. Still down, I decided to drive into town. The nearest grocery store was 10 miles away, down the winding access road that connected Echo Creek to the highway. I needed to get out. I needed to see normal people. I grabbed my keys and went to the garage. My car is a reliable sedan, boring but functional. I got in, hit the garage door opener, and backed out. As I pulled onto the street, I passed Thomas. He was putting mail in the miller's box. He waved. I waved back, gripping the steering wheel. I drove toward the exit of the estates. The road winds through dense forest before hitting the main gate. The gate is usually open during the day. As I rounded the final bend, I saw it. The gate was closed, a heavy iron barrier that I had never seen shut before. And standing in front of it were two men in military fatigues. They held rifles. They wore gas masks. I slowed the car. They raised their hands, palms out. Stop. I rolled down the window. What's going on? I asked. I need to get to work. The soldier on the left stepped forward. His voice was muffled by the mask, processed and metallic. Road is closed. Mudslide on the pass. No one in or out until the crews clear it. Mudslide? I looked at the sky. It hadn't rained in a week. It's bone dry. The mountain has its own weather, the soldier said. Turn around, sir. Return to your residence. Await the all-clear siren. I can't go back there, I said, my voice rising. There's something wrong with the broadcast. Someone tried to break into my house. The soldier leaned in. The black lenses of his mask reflected my own terrified face. The broadcast is a test of the emergency alert system. It malfunctions sometimes. As for the intruder, lock your doors. It keeps the wildlife out. It spoke to me, I whispered. The intruder spoke to me. The soldier stiffened. He looked at his partner, then back at me. He shifted his grip on the rifle. Sir, turn around, now. There was a finality in his tone that cut through my panic. He wasn't asking. He was aiming. I put the car in reverse. I turned around. As I drove back up the hill, I looked in the rearview mirror. The soldiers weren't watching me. They were looking up at the sky. When I got back to the house, it was noon. The siren wailed. Lunchtime. I didn't eat. I sat in front of the television. I turned it on. Channel 5. The music played. The text scrolled. Community potluck this Sunday. Road closed due to mudslide. Please remain calm. They updated it. They updated the scroll in real time. I flipped to Channel 4. Static. Just white noise. But as I stared at it, shapes began to form in the snow. Faces. Screaming faces. And the sound. The sound wasn't just static anymore. It was a voice, buried deep in the mix, whispered so low I had to press my ear to the speaker. They are lying. The slide is a cage. The soldiers are not men. The neighbors are husks. Check your basement. Check the foundation. The hum comes from below. I pulled back. Check the basement. I hadn't been in the basement since I moved in. It was a damp, unfinished concrete box filled with the previous owner's junk. I grabbed a flashlight. I opened the door in the kitchen that led down. The air that rushed up was cold, freezing cold, and it smelled of ozone and rot. I walked down the wooden steps. They creaked under my weight. I swept the flashlight beam across the room. Boxes of old magazines, a rusted bicycle, and in the far corner, a wall that looked different. The concrete was newer there, smoother. I walked over to it. I put my hand on the wall. It was vibrating. The hum, the static in my head, it was coming from behind this wall. I found a crowbar on a workbench. I don't know what possessed me. Maybe it was the lack of sleep. Maybe it was the realization that I was trapped in a fishbowl with monsters. I started to hit the wall. The concrete chipped away easily, too easily. It was thin, a facade. Behind the concrete there was metal, a door, a heavy, blast-proof steel door with a wheel handle, and stenciled on the metal in fading yellow paint, were words that made my blood run cold. Project Echo. Observation, Unit 4. Subject, Charlie Davis. Charlie Davis. Charlie Davis. That's my name. I dropped the crowbar. The clang echoed in the small space. Subject, Observation Unit. I wasn't in a town. I wasn't in a neighborhood. I was in a cage. Mrs. Higgins, Thomas, the soldiers, they were the keepers. Or maybe there were just other parts of the experiment. Suddenly, the lights in the basement died. Pitch black. The hum stopped. The vibration in the walls ceased instantly, leaving a silence so profound it hurt my ears. Then, from the steel door in front of me came a sound. Click, clack, spin. The wheel was turning. From the other side, I backed away, stumbling over boxes, trying to find the stairs in the dark. The wheel spun faster, squealing, rust grinding on rust. And then, the voice from the broadcast, the voice from the front door. Assessment complete. It boomed, echoing off the concrete walls. Subject has breached containment protocols. Initiating Phase 2. The steel door swung open. A light poured out, but it wasn't the warm light of the sun, and it wasn't the harsh light of a bulb. It was static. Pure, blinding, white visual noise that roared like a jet engine. I scrambled up the stairs. I slammed the basement door and locked it. I dragged the kitchen table in front of it. The house began to shake. The plates rattled in the cupboards. The windows vibrated. I ran to the living room. The television was on. The volume was maxed out. Broadcast interrupted. Broadcast interrupted. The text flashed red. This is not a test. Seacat shelter immediately. The obessers are in staring the habitat. I looked out the window. The sun was gone. It was supposed to be 1 p.m., but the sky was black. Not night black. Void black. The streetlights popped one by one, exploding in showers of sparks. And on every lawn, in front of every beige house, they were standing. Mrs. Higgins, Thomas, the Millers, dozens of others I didn't know. They were all standing perfectly still, facing my house, their mouths open in silent screams, their eyes wide, black and leaking a thick dark fluid. They all took one step forward. Then the power died. I am sitting in the corner of my bedroom now. I have my laptop. It has a battery. I am typing this because I need someone to know. I need someone to understand that Echo Creek isn't a place on a map. If you see an ad for cheap real estate in a quiet valley, run. If you hear a hum in your teeth, run. There is scratching on the bedroom door, not the polite knock of a neighbor. It sounds like metal on wood. It sounds like they are peeling the house apart, layer by layer, to get to the soft center. The static is getting louder. It's not in the walls anymore. It's in my head. And it's starting to make sense. It's starting to sound like a lullaby. I think I'm going to open the door. I think I need to see the colors they talked about. Wait, the broadcast. The TV in the living room just turned back on. I can hear it through the door. It's running on battery? No, it's not plugged in. How is it on? The voice is back. But it's my voice. It's me speaking. Subject Charlie Davis. Termination approved. Resetting simulation in 5, 4, 3. If you are reading this, do not seek shelter. There is no shelter. 2. There is only the broadcast. 1. 0. There was no explosion. There was no pain. There was just a sudden, absolute absence of everything. For a moment that could have lasted a second or a century, I floated in a void that smelled of ozone and burning plastic. I was conscious, but I had no body. I was just a thought suspended in the dark, and then the sensation of falling. A violent stomach-churning drop that ended with a gasp. My eyes snapped open. I was in my bed. The sheets were tangled around my legs, damp with sweat. The morning light was filtering through the blinds, casting striped shadows across the beige carpet. It was quiet, peaceful, The terrified pounding of my heart was the only sound in the room. I sat up, my hands trembling as I touched my face, my chest, my legs. I was whole. I wasn't bleeding. I wasn't dead. I looked at the digital clock on the nightstand. 6:59 a.m. I stared at the red numbers, the dread coiling in my stomach like a cold snake. I knew what was coming. I squeezed my eyes shut and covered my ears. 7 a.m. The siren wailed. It was the same sound as before, that mechanical howl from the North Ridge that signaled the start of the day. But this time, it felt different. It felt mocking. It vibrated through the mattress, shaking my bones. It lasted for exactly 10 seconds, just like it always did, and then cut off into silence. I didn't move. I couldn't. I waited for the static to return, for the voice of my own termination to echo from the living room. But there was nothing. Just the chirping of a bird outside. A robin, maybe. Or a recording of a robin. I threw the covers off and swung my legs out of bed. My ankle. I remembered twisting it when I ran from the kitchen. I remembered the sharp, hot pain. I looked down. My ankle was smooth, unblemished. I rotated it. No pain, nothing. I stood up and walked to the bedroom door. It was closed. I reached for the handle, my hand hovering over the brass knob. I remembered the scratching. I remembered the sound of metal peeling away wood. I opened the door. The hallway was pristine. The paint was perfect. There were no gouges, no claw marks. The house smelled of lemon pledge and stale air. It was as if the night before had never happened. As if the broadcast, the neighbors, the basement, it was all a hallucination brought on by isolation and cheap beer. But I knew better. I knew because of the hum. It was louder today. Before, it had been a background noise, a nuisance you could tune out. Now, it was a physical pressure. It felt like I was underwater, the weight of the air pressing against my eardrums. I walked into the living room. The heavy armchair was back in its corner, not shoved against the front door. The TV was off. I stared at the blank screen, seeing my own reflection in the dark glass. I looked tired, pale, but alive. I needed to check the basement. That was the key. The concrete wall, the steel door, the stenciled letters designating me as a subject. If that was real, then none of this was a dream. I went to the kitchen. I opened the basement door. The smell hit me instantly. That rotten ozone smell, stronger than the lemon polish. I flicked the light switch. The bulb at the bottom of the stairs buzzed to life, casting a sickly yellow glow over the concrete steps. I descended slowly, gripping the handrail. My footsteps echoed too loudly. I reached the bottom and turned to the far corner, to the place where I had chipped away the facade. The wall was smooth. I ran my hands over the cold gray surface. There were no chips. No cracks. It was solid concrete. I looked around for the crowbar I had used. The workbench was empty. The rusted bicycle was there. The boxes of magazines were there. But the crowbar was gone. I stood there, my hands flat against the wall, breathing hard. Was I crazy? Was that it? Had I finally snapped under the weight of my own solitude? It would be a comforting thought, in a way. Insanity is treatable. Insanity means the monsters are in your head, not on your lawn. But then I saw it. On the floor, right at the base of the wall where the steel door should have been, was a flake of paint. It was yellow, a tiny dried chip of yellow stencil paint. I picked it up. It crumbled into dust on my fingertip. They had patched it. They had reset the stage. Subject Charlie Davis, I whispered. Resetting simulation. I wasn't crazy. I was just back at the start. Or maybe not the start. Maybe this was just the next day in a loop that had been running for years. How long had I really been here? 3 months? Or had I just lived the same 3 months over and over again? My memory wiped each time the wheel turned? I went back upstairs. I needed to get out. I needed to try the road again. Maybe the soldiers wouldn't be there this time. Maybe the gate would be open. I grabbed my keys from the hook by the door. As I reached for them, I noticed something on the small entry table. It was a letter. A plain white envelope with no stamp and no return address. Just my name, Charlie, scrawled in handwriting that looked disturbingly familiar. It looked like mine. I hadn't put it there. I ripped it open. Inside was a single sheet of notebook paper. The ink was fresh, smudged in places. It gets worse at night. The second time is harder. They know you know now. Don't eat the food. Don't drink the water. And for the love of God, don't open the door for the mailman. I stared at the note. Don't open the door for the mailman. I looked at the clock. 7:58 a.m. Thomas delivered the mail at 8. I ran to the window. The cul-de-sac was bathed in that weak, gray morning light. And there he was. The white truck with the blue stripe was rounding the corner. It wasn't sputtering today. It was gliding. It moved silently, the tires making no sound on the asphalt. Thomas was driving. He pulled up to the curb in front of my house. He didn't go to the mailbox. He killed the engine. He stepped out of the truck. He wasn't limping. He walked with a fluid, predatory grace, his uniform crisp and clean. He was holding a package, a brown cardboard box wrapped in twine. He walked up my driveway, his eyes fixed on the front window. On me. He couldn't see me through the glare, surely, but he smiled. A wide, knowing smile that stretched the skin of his cheeks too tight. He walked up the porch steps. Knock, knock. Delivery from Mr. Bott. Davis, Thomas called out. His voice wasn't the friendly, tired drawl of the man I knew. It was bright, chipper. It sounded like a radio DJ. Priority delivery. Signature required. I backed away from the window. The note. Don't open the door for the mailman. I know you're in there, Charlie, Thomas said. He was right against the door now. We missed you at the reset. We were worried. The director sent you a care package. The director. Leave it on the porch, I shouted. Proto requires a signature, Thomas replied instantly. Flesh to paper. Ink to skin. Open the door, Charlie. It's rude to keep a civil servant waiting. Go away. It's perishable, Thomas said. His voice dropped an octave. It will spoil if you don't open the door. It will rot, like the last one. The last one? I ran to the kitchen and grabbed the biggest knife I could find. Not the steak knife this time, the carving knife. I went back to the hallway, staying out of sight of the peephole. I'm calling the police. I lied. Thomas laughed. It was a sound like gravel in a blender. The police? Officer Miller is busy. He's preparing for the potluck. Everyone is preparing for the potluck. You're the guest of honor, Charlie. Main course. Main course. The knocking stopped. I waited. Was he leaving? Then the mail slot at the bottom of the door creaked open. 2 fingers slid through. They were long. Too long. Gray and jointed like twigs. They wiggled, feeling the air inside the house. Just a signature, Thomas whispered through the slot. Just a touch. I stomped on the fingers. There was a crunch, like snapping dry wood. Thomas didn't scream. He hissed. The fingers retracted instantly. Strike 1, Thomas said from the other side. 3 strikes, Charlie. You know the rules. I heard footsteps retreating off the porch. I heard the truck door slam. I heard the engine start. Not a sputter, but a deep guttural roar that vibrated the floorboards. I ran to the window. The truck peeled away, vanishing around the curve. I looked at the porch. The package was gone, but where he had stood, there was a puddle. A black, oily substance that bubbled and smoked on the concrete mat. I was trapped. The basement was a dead end. The front door was a siege line. I needed to think. I needed to understand the rules of this place if I was going to break them. I went back to the television, Channel 5. Happy 8th birthday to Timmy Miller. The text was scrolling faster now. Lost, golden retriever. Answers to Buster. Found, Charlie Davis. Status, non-compliant. Threat level elevating. They were tracking me. In real time, I grabbed the remote and switched to channel 4. Static. But this time, it wasn't just noise. It was a pattern. The black and white snow was moving in waves, pulsing with the hum in the walls. I sat down on the floor, cross-legged, and stared at it. If this was an observation unit, there had to be a two-way mirror. There had to be a feed. "Can you hear me?" I asked the screen. The static spiked, a loud crackle. "I know I'm in a box," I said. I saw the door. "Project Echo. I know you're watching." The static swirled. It formed a shape. A mouth. A giant, jagged mouth made of white noise. "WEEC." The voice didn't come from the speakers. It came from inside my head. It sounded like tearing paper. "WEC. WE, hair. WE, hunger. What do you want?" I demanded. "Data." The mouth moved on the screen. "Fear, responsi, adaptability, breaking point." "I'm not gonna break," I said, though my shaking hands betrayed me. "You always break, Charlie. This is iteration." 234. "You have broken 233 times. The fruit is always rotten. The door is always closed. The static always wins." Iteration 234. I had done this over 200 times. The nausea returned, violent and sudden. "Why?" I asked. "Why me? You were chap. The screen went black. The TV were cap. The screen went black. The TV turned off." I sat there in the silence, the insult stinging more than the horror. I was a subject because I was cheap real estate. Because nobody would miss a man with debt, and no family who moved to a valley with bad reception. I stood up. Anger was better than fear. Anger was fuel. If I had done this 233 times, that meant I had failed 233 times. I had probably tried the road every time. I had probably tried to hide in the basement. I had probably tried to fight Thomas. I needed to do something I hadn't done before. I needed to be unpredictable. I looked at the windows. Do not look at the windows. That was the rule. I walked to the big bay window in the front room. I grabbed the curtains and ripped them down. The sunlight, or whatever light this was, flooded the room. It was harsh, bleaching the colors out of the furniture. I unlocked the window. I threw it open. The air outside was thick. It tasted metallic. "Mrs. Higgins!" I screamed. "Hey, Mrs. Higgins!" The woman across the street froze. She was kneeling by her roses again. She turned her head slowly. Her eyes were still those black saucers. "Charlie," she called back. Her voice was sweet, sickly sweet. "You're letting the conditioned air out, dear." "I'm coming over," I yelled. "I'm coming to your house." That got a reaction. She stood up, dropping her shears. "No, dear, that's against protocol. Guests must be invited. You haven't received your card." "I don't care." I climbed out the window. My feet hit the flower bed. The soil felt wrong. It was squishy, pulsing like a sponge soaked in warm water. I stepped onto the lawn. The grass hissed. It wasn't a wind sound. It was the blades of grass rubbing against my jeans. They were sharp, serrated. I looked down. The grass wasn't green plant matter. It was wire. Millions of thin, green-painted copper wires sticking out of the black earth. I winced as a wire poked through the rubber of my sneaker. But I kept walking. I marched across the street. Mrs. Higgins backed away toward her porch. "Go back, Charlie. The observers aren't ready. The lighting isn't right." "Tell me how to leave," I said. I was halfway across the asphalt. The heat radiating off the blacktop was intense. It smelled like tar and old meat. "You can't leave," Mrs. Higgins said. Her face began to ripple. Like a video data motion, her features slid sideways. Her nose migrated to her cheek. Her mouth stretched vertically. "There is no leave. There is only the valley." "There's a door in my basement," I said. "There has to be a door in yours." I reached the curb of her lawn. I stepped onto her grass. The moment my foot touched her property, a siren went off. Not the one from the ridge. A personal one. It came from her house. A deafening red strobe light flashing above her garage. Intruder alert. Cross-contamination detected. Mrs. Higgins let out a shriek that sounded like a dial-up modem connecting to hell. She dropped to all fours. Her limbs lengthened, snapping and popping, tearing through her floral dress. Her gray hair fell out in clumps, revealing a scalp that was made of polished chrome. She wasn't a woman. She was a construct. A frame of metal and meat, wrapped in a grandmother's skin. She scuttled toward me, moving like a spider. I turned and ran. I didn't run back to my house. I ran toward the space between her house and the miller's. I ran toward the woods behind the cul-de-sac. "Stop him," Mrs. Higgins screeched. "He's going off, Map." I heard other doors opening. I heard the slap of heavy feet on pavement. The whole neighborhood was waking up. The millers were coming out. Thomas was driving his truck across the lawn, crushing the wiregrass. I hit the tree line. The trees were tall pines, their branches woven together into a dense canopy that blocked out the gray sky. I plunged into the undergrowth. The branches whipped my face. They didn't feel like wood. They felt like rubber. The leaves felt like plastic. I was running through a model train set built by a madman. I ran until my lungs burned. I ran until the sounds of the pursuit faded into the distance, replaced by the overwhelming, throbbing hum of the frequency. I stopped, leaning against a tree to catch my breath. I looked around. The forest was identical in every direction. The same 5 trees copy-pasted over and over again. And then I saw it. About 50 yards ahead, the world just ended. There was no horizon. There were no mountains. There was just a wall. A matte black wall that stretched up into the sky as far as I could see. It was a grid. Faint green lines crisscrossed the blackness. I walked toward it. The ground here was unfinished. The texture of the dirt was low resolution, blocky and pixelated. I reached the wall. I touched it. It hummed. It was warm. It was a screen. A giant, impossible screen. I looked up. The sky wasn't a sky. It was a ceiling. I was in a dome. A massive technological terrarium. "Iteration 234, a voice said behind me. I spun around. Standing there, amidst the plastic trees, was a man. He looked exactly like me. He was wearing the same jeans, the same t-shirt, but he looked older. His hair was graying. He had a scar running down the side of his face, and he was holding a crowbar. "Who are you?" I whispered. "I'm Charlie," he said. "I'm Charlie 233. I didn't get reset." "How?" "I found a glitch," the other Charlie said. He pointed to the ground. "I dug. I dug deep enough to hide from the signal. You survived the reset?" "Survived is a strong word," Charlie 233 said. He stepped closer. I saw that his eyes were bloodshot, yellowed. I hid. I waited you wake up. I watched you make the same mistakes I made. "The note," I said. "You left the note." "I tried," he said, "but the memory fades, the static takes it. I barely remember writing it." "How do we get out?" I asked. "Is there a door?" Charlie 233 laughed. It was a broken, hopeless sound. "There's no door, kid. The basement door leads to the incinerator. That's how they reset us. They burn the biologicals and print a new one." I felt the blood drain from my face. "They print us?" "Project Echo," he said. "It's not about observing us. It's about testing the printing technology. How many times can they copy a consciousness before it degrades, before it starts to glitch?" He looked at his hand. It was flickering. For a second, his fingers disappeared, replaced by wireframe geometry, then snapped back to flesh. "I'm glitching," he said. "I've been here too long. The system is trying to delete me." "We have to do something," I said. I looked at the giant screen wall. "Can we break this?" "I've tried," he said, hefting the crowbar. It's diamond glass. Indestructible. Nothing is indestructible, I said. I looked at the wire grass. I looked at the plastic trees. This whole place runs on power. The frequency. The hum. It takes energy to run a simulation this real. Yeah, Charlie 233 said. The North Ridge. That's where the generator is. But the soldiers guard the gate. We don't need the gate, I said. I pointed at the sky, at the ceiling. We need to go up. Up? The antennae array, I said. The real estate agent mentioned it. It keeps the airspace clear. If this is a dome, the array must be on top of it, or integrated into it. And how do we get up there? I looked at the tree I was leaning against. It was rubbery, fake, but it was tall, and it touched the ceiling grid. We climb, I said. Charlie to 3033 looked at the tree, then at me. A spark of life returned to his yellow eyes. Climb the set. Break the lights. Exactly. They'll see us, he said. Mrs. Higgins, the broadcast. Let them look, I said. They want a show? Let's give them a finale. We started to climb. The bark was slippery, providing no traction, but the branches were sturdy. We climbed higher and higher, the air getting thinner, the hum getting louder, until my teeth ached. Below us, I could see the neighborhood. It looked like a toy town. I saw the black dots that were the neighbors swarming around the edge of the forest. I saw the white mail truck circling. We reached the top of the tree. The branches pressed against the black grid. I reached up and touched the ceiling. It was hot, vibrating. Give me the crowbar, I said. Charlie 233 handed it to me. On 3, I said. 1, he counted. He was flickering more now. His face kept disappearing, revealing a skull of white light beneath. 2, 3. I swung the crowbar upward with everything I had. I aimed for the intersection of the green grid lines. Slang. The sound was thunderous. A shockwave traveled down my arm, nearly knocking me off the branch. But above me, the black screen flickered. A crack appeared. A jagged line of white light. Warning. Containment breach. Sector 9. The voice boomed from the sky itself. It was deafening. Subject Starley Davis, cease and desist. Termination imminent. Hit it again, Charlie. 233 screamed. His legs were gone now, just floating polygons. Hit it again before I delete. I swung again, and again. The crack widened. Pieces of the screen rained down like black glass confetti. Through the hole I saw something. Not the sky, not stars. I saw a laboratory. I saw a giant walkway, fluorescent lights, and men in white coats looking down at me through the hole in their floor. They looked terrified. I was in a box. A literal box buried in the floor of a facility. Hey, I screamed up at them. I see you. One of the men in coats reached for a panel on the wall. A red button. No, Charlie 233 yelled. He lunged upward. He grabbed the crowbar from my hand. He was mostly wireframe now, a ghost in the machine. Go, climb through. He threw the crowbar through the hole. It clattered onto the walkway above. What are you doing? I cried. I'm the glitch, he said. His voice was distorting, becoming digital noise. I'm going to overload the local node. You climb. He grabbed the grid lines with his glowing, geometric hands. He screamed and his body exploded into blinding light. He channeled himself, his entire code, into the barrier. The screen shorted out. The blackness dissolved into static. The hole widened, melting the edges of the simulation. I pulled myself up. I scrambled through the jagged opening, cutting my hands on the edges of reality. I hauled myself onto the cold metal grating of the walkway. I stood up. I was in a massive warehouse. Row after row of black domes stretched out into the distance. Thousands of them, and inside each one, I realized with a sick horror, was probably another Charlie Davis, or someone else. The scientists were backing away, Security guards were running down the catwalks, rifles raised. I looked back down into the hole. The forest was gone. The neighborhood was gone. It was just a pit of swirling static and fire. I turned to the scientists. I was ragged, bleeding, and armed with nothing but the knowledge of what they had done. "My name is Charlie Davis," I said, my voice echoing in the vast, sterile hall. "And I'm quitting the project." I ran. The alarm blared. Containment breach. Complager's containment breach. Multiple subjects are black. Multiple. I looked to my left. Another dome was cracking. A fist punched through from the inside. Then another. The hum was gone. The static was gone. Now there was only the sound of glass breaking. Everywhere. The air in the facility tasted like pennies and rubbing alcohol. It was a sharp, sterile shock to my lungs compared to the damp pine air of the simulation. I sprinted along the metal grating of the catwalk, the soles of my sneakers slapping against the steel mesh. Below me, the warehouse floor was a chaotic sea of white lab coats and black tactical gear. Red light strobed against the curved black surfaces of the domes. The alarm wasn't just a sound. It was a physical force. A rhythmic thumping that synced with the adrenaline pumping through my veins. Containment breach. Mule typal subjects awaki. I didn't look back. I knew what was behind me. The hole I had clawed through reality was still smoking, the edges of the simulation melting into digital slag. I knew the scientists were scrambling, their clipboards forgotten, their precious data corrupted by the anomaly of a man who refused to be deleted. A bullet pinged off the handrail inches from my hip. Sparks showered my leg. "Target is mobile on level 4 catwalk," a voice shouted from below. "Authorized to use lethal force. Do not let him reach the central hub." Lethal force. They weren't trying to capture me. They were trying to erase a mistake. I ducked low, using the machinery lining the walkway as cover. Thick bundles of cables pulsed with blue light, feeding power down into the domes. I passed a junction box labeled Dome 405, Alpine Serenio. Through the darkened glass of the dome's apex, I caught a glimpse of a snowstorm. Inside, a tiny figure was huddled against a plastic pine tree, freezing to death while artificial wind howled. I wanted to stop. I wanted to smash the glass and pull them out, but the footsteps behind me were getting louder. Heavy boots. The jingle of tactical harnesses. I reached a ladder and slid down it, the friction burning my palms. I landed on a lower maintenance deck. This area was darker, filled with the hum of massive ventilation fans. Suddenly, a door to my left burst open. A guard stepped out. He was dressed in full riot gear, his face obscured by a black visor. He raised a rifle. I didn't think. My body moved with a speed that felt unnatural. I wasn't just Charlie Davis, the guy with debt and the drinking problem. I was Charlie Davis, iteration 234. I was a copy that had been refined over 200 lifetimes of running and hiding. I lunged. I grabbed the barrel of the rifle and shoved it upward. The gun went off, a deafening crack that blew out a steam pipe above us. Hot vapor hissed into the corridor. The guard stumbled back. I drove my shoulder into his chest. It felt like hitting a brick wall, but he went down. He hit the metal floor hard. I scrambled on top of him, ripping the helmet from his head. I expected to see a man, a soldier, someone just doing his job. What I saw made me recoil in horror. The face beneath the visor wasn't human. It was smooth, featureless plastic. No eyes, no nose, just a speaker grill where the mouth should have been. It wasn't a robot, though. The neck was flesh. Veins pulsed under the synthetic skin. It was a cyborg, or a lobotomized human grafted into a suit. Subject 234. The speaker grill clicked. The voice was flat, synthesized. Please assume the submission posture. I punched the speaker grill. I hit it again and again until the plastic cracked and the voice dissolved into static. I grabbed the rifle. It was heavy, sleek, and felt cold in my hands. I stood up, breathing hard. staring down at the thing I had just neutralized. "The neighbors are husks," I whispered, remembering the broadcast. "The soldiers are not men." I ran. I navigated the maze of the lower decks, guided by instinct and the layout of the power cables. They all seemed to lead toward the center of the facility, toward a massive pillar of black metal that rose from the floor to the ceiling, piercing through the catwalks like a spear. The central hub. As I moved closer, the noise changed. The alarm faded into the background, overpowered by a new sound. It was the hum. The same frequency that had vibrated in my teeth back in Echo Creek, but here, it was raw. It was a choir of screaming voices layered over the sound of a high-voltage arc. I reached a heavy blast door. It was slightly ajar. I slipped through. I was in a circular room. The walls were lined with screens, hundreds of them, creating a mosaic of surveillance. I saw everything. I saw a desert town where people were frantically digging for water that wasn't there. I saw a suburban street where the houses were burning, and the residents stood on their lawns, clapping. I saw a dense jungle where something large and reptilian hunted, screaming subjects through the ferns. Project Echo wasn't just one neighborhood. It was a multiverse of torture. In the center of the room, sitting at a horseshoe-shaped console, was a man. He wasn't a husk. He wasn't a soldier. He was old, his skin like parchment paper, wearing a white suit that looked too large for his frail frame. He was watching the screens with a look of intense, scholarly boredom. He didn't turn around when I entered. "You're early, Charlie?" he said. His voice was dry, dusty. The simulation usually runs for another 3 weeks before the breakdown event. I raised the rifle. "Turn off the alarms. Open the doors." The old man chuckled. He swiveled his chair around. His eyes were milky white, blind, yet he looked directly at me. "Doors to where, son? You think there's an exit? You think you can just walk out into the parking lot and drive home?" "I escaped the dome," I said, my finger tightening on the trigger. "I can escape this building." "This building," the old man gestured vaguely, "is a bunker. It is buried 3 miles beneath the crust of a dead planet. There's no home to go to, Charlie. Earth has been a cinder for 300 years. I froze. The rifle wavered. "You're lying. The broadcast. It said containment failed. It said the frequency was bleeding." "Narrative." The old man waved his hand dismissively. "Plot devices. We use the containment failure script to induce panic. Panic spikes the cortisol levels. Cortisol flavors the harvest." "Harvest?" I stepped closer. "What are you harvesting?" "Consciousness," he said simply. "Experience. Soul, if you want to be poetic about it. The biological brain creates a unique energy signature when it is under duress. When it is terrified. We call it the static. It keeps the lights on down here. It powers the life support. You and your neighbors. You are batteries. Very complex, very expensive batteries." He tapped the console. A screen enlarged. It showed my house, my empty living room. The TV was on, displaying static. "You are iteration 234, he continued. "Do you know what happened to the first 233 Charlies?" "They died," I said. "They broke. They burned out," he corrected. "Like light bulbs. The human mind, it can only process so much artificial horror before it snaps. Before the code degrades and the subject becomes useless. Then we incinerate the body, download the core personality from the server, print a fresh biological shell, and start again. Fresh memories, fresh terror." I remembered Charlie 233. I remembered his flickering hand. "I'm glitching," he had said. "Why?" I asked, my voice trembling. "If the world is dead, why keep us alive just to torture us? Why not just let us sleep?" The old man smiled. It was a cruel, toothless expression. "Because they are listening." He pointed a shaking finger upward. "The static isn't just power, Charlie. It's camouflage. There are things in the void, things that came from the stars and ate the world. They hunt by detecting order. They hunt by finding peace. But chaos, fear, Pain, it is like white noise to them. It hides us. As long as you are screaming, we are safe. I stared at him. It was madness. It had to be. Just another layer of the simulation. Another script designed to break me. You're lying, I said again. Am I? He tapped a sequence of keys. Look at the main screen. The massive wall of monitors went black. Then a single image appeared. It was a camera feed from the surface. It was gray, desolate. The sky was a swirling vortex of purple clouds and lightning. The ground was glass, fused by intense heat, and walking through the ruins were shapes. Colossal, spindly things that looked like spiders made of shadow and starlight. They stepped delicately over the wreckage of a city, their many eyes scanning the ground. The observers, the old man whispered. The real ones, not the actors in rubber masks I send to your door. Those things up there, they feed on silence. I looked at the screen. The monsters were huge, terrifying, but they felt distant. The horror in the domes felt intimate. So you torture us to save yourselves, I said. We save the species, he replied. We have DNA banks, we have history servers, we are the ark, and you are the engine. I quit, I said. The old man sighed. You can't quit, Charlie. You're ink, you're code. You don't exist outside of the project. If I turn off the machine, you cease to be. Then turn it off. I can't do that. Then I will. I raised the butt of the rifle and smashed it into the console. Sparks flew. The old man shrieked, shielding his face. I hit it again. Glass shattered. Circuit boards crunched. Stop, he screamed. You'll kill us all. You'll drop the shield. Good, I grunted, swinging the rifle like a club. Let him come. I'd rather be eaten by a star spider than live another day in Echo Creek. I destroyed the keyboard. I smashed the monitors. The room plunged into darkness, illuminated only by the spark spitting from the ruined terminal. The hum in the air began to falter. The screaming choir turned into a low, dying moan. Security, the old man yelled into a dead microphone. Security to the hub. I grabbed the old man by his lapels. He weighed nothing. Where is the printer, I asked. Where do you make us? He wheezed, spit dribbling down his chin. Sector 9. Below the incinerator. Why? You can't print yourself an exit. No, I said, shoving him back into his chair. But I can print an army. I turned and ran out of the control room. The hallway lights were flickering now, switching to emergency red. The facility was waking up to the damage I had done. The air handlers were shutting down. The temperature was rising. I needed to find Sector 9. I consulted the map I had seen on a wall earlier. Sector 9 was deep. Past the hydroponics, past the barracks of the plastic soldiers. I moved fast. I didn't encounter any more guards for a while. They were likely converging on the hub or dealing with the other breakouts. I passed other domes. Some were dark, the simulations inside offline. I saw people banging on the glass, their faces twisted in confusion and terror as their fake skies turned off. I reached a freight elevator. I hit the button. It didn't work. The power was cutting out. I pried the doors open. The shaft was black, smelling of grease. I grabbed the cables and slid down. It was rough on my hands. The friction tearing skin, but I didn't care. I was Charlie, 234, and I was done playing by the rules. I dropped onto the roof of the elevator car 2 floors down. I opened the hatch and dropped inside. The doors here opened easily. I stepped out into Sector 9. This place was different. It didn't look like a warehouse. It looked like a meat factory. The walls were tiled in white. The floor was slick with pink fluid. And everywhere there were tanks. Huge cylindrical glass tanks filled with amber liquid. Inside the tanks were bodies, hundreds of them, thousands. They hung suspended in the fluid, umbilical cables attached to the base of their skulls. Some were fully formed men, women, children. Others were half finished, muscle and bone without skin, their eyes lidless and staring. I walked down the aisle of tanks. I saw faces I recognized. There was a tank full of Truddies, a tank full of Harolds, a tank full of Thomases. And then I found my row. Tank after tank of Charlie Davis. Some were old, some were young, some looked exactly like me. They floated in the silence, waiting for their turn to be uploaded, terrified and burned. At the end of the row was a massive machine. It looked like an MRI scanner crossed with a spider web. Robotic arms moved with blinding speed, weaving muscle fibers onto a skeleton. It was printing. Iteration 235, a computerized voice announced. Fabrication at 45%. I walked up to the machine. There was a control panel. It was still active, running on an auxiliary generator. I looked at the interface. It was surprisingly simple. A queue of subjects. A list of scenarios. Select scenario. Echo Creek, Silent Hill, Suburbia, Nightmare. I looked at the queue. It was set to single subject deployment. I tapped the screen. I changed the setting. Batch deployment. Select quantity. AL. Warning. Batch deployment exceeds power parameters. System instability imminent. Do it, I whispered. I hit execute. The machine stopped printing. The robotic arms retracted. The lights in the room shifted from red to a blinding white. Around me, the tanks began to drain. The amber fluid gushed out into floor grates. The cables detached from the skulls of the sleeping clones with a wet pop. I watched as the Charlie in the tank next to me slumped to the floor of his glass cage. He coughed. He choked on the residual fluid. Then he opened his eyes. They were my eyes. Confused, terrified, angry. He looked at me through the glass. He put a hand on the wall. I smashed the glass with the butt of the rifle. Fluid and glass washed over my feet. The other Charlie fell out, shivering on the wet tiles. "Who?" he gasped. "Who are you?" "I'm you," I said, offering him a hand. "I'm the one who woke up." Down the line, glass was shattering. Hundreds of Charlies were punching their way out. And beyond them, the Harolds, the Trudys, the Mrs. Higginses. The army of the dead and the copied. "What do we do?" the new Charlie asked, looking around at the factory of horrors. "We go upstairs," I said. "We find the director, and then we open the front door." "The front door?" "The big one," I said. "The one to the surface." "But the monsters," he stammered. "The things outside. The old man said they feed on silence," I told him, looking at the growing mob of confused, angry clones gathering behind us. "He said they hunt by finding peace." I checked the ammunition in the rifle. "We're going to make a lot of noise." The floor shook. A deep rumble came from above. The overload I had triggered in the hub was cascading. The facility was dying. "Grab a weapon," I shouted to the room. The clones turned to look at me. Thousands of eyes. "Grab a bar. Grab a shard of glass. Grab anything." A roar went up from the crowd. It wasn't the scream of a victim. It was the war cry of a species that had been pushed too far. We moved toward the stairs, a tide of flesh in rage. We surged up from the depths of Sector 9, a chaotic flood spilling into the main corridors. The security guards didn't stand a chance. The plastic-faced soldiers fired into the crowd, dropping bodies, but for every clone that fell, 3 more took their place. We swarmed them. We tore their armor off. We used their own weapons against them. It was brutal. It was messy. It was necessary. We reached the main warehouse floor. The domes were dark now. The simulations were dead. The subjects inside were pounding on the walls, screaming to be let out. We smashed the glass. We freed them. The army grew. I led the charge toward the massive blast doors at the far end of the facility. The airlock to the surface. The sign above it read, "Surface Ace Tests, RS Strict, Biostard Level 5. The old man, the director, was standing on a gantry above the door. He was surrounded by his elite guard. He held a microphone. His voice boomed over the dying facility speakers. "You fools," he shrieked. "You don't know what you're doing. You are undoing 3 centuries of survival. If you open that door, the static drops." "They will see us. Let them see," I yelled back. I aimed the rifle at the control panel for the blast door. I didn't have the code. I didn't need it. I pulled the trigger. The panel exploded. Sparks showered down. The hydraulic locks on the massive door hissed. K-A-yunt, K-yunt, K-yunt. The door groaned. It began to slide open. A wind rushed in. It wasn't just air. It was a vacuum, sucking the atmosphere out of the facility. It smelled of sulfur and ancient dust. The gap widened. A foot. 2 feet. Through the opening, I saw the sky. It was exactly as the director had shown me. A swirling, bruised purple bruise of a sky, lit by jagged streaks of red lightning, and standing there, waiting, were the legs of something immense, a limb the size of a skyscraper, made of chitin and shadow. The director screamed as the wind pulled him off the gantry. He fell into the crowd and was gone. I stood at the front of the army. I dropped the rifle. It was useless against what was out there. The door opened fully. The desolate landscape of the dead earth stretched out before us. The observers turned their many eyes toward the facility. They chittered, a sound that vibrated in the marrow of my bones. They had found us. The noise had drawn them, but as I stepped out onto the glass-fused soil, the wind whipping through my hair, I didn't feel fear. I felt the cold air on my real skin. I felt the ground under my real feet. The static in my head was gone. The hum was gone. I looked back at the thousands of people behind me. Copies, prints, glitches, but alive. Run, I screamed. Scatter, make noise. Don't let them have peace. We ran into the wasteland. We ran into the storm. We were the broadcast now, and we would not be interrupted again. The wind out here doesn't howl. It shrieks. It tears across the glass plains of the dead earth with a sound like 1,000 knives being sharpened on a grinding wheel. We ran until our lungs burned, until the muscles in our printed legs seized and spasmed, but there was nowhere to run to. The director had been right about one thing. The world was a cinder. I don't know how many of us made it past the initial breach. I remember the sound of the blast door sealing shut behind us, a final, booming note of rejection from the facility that had birthed us. I remember the screams of the ones who were too slow, the ones who were snatched up by the spindly, shadow limbs of the observers waiting in the storm. Those things, up close, they aren't spiders. They are geometry gone wrong. They are towering constructs of negative space, holes in the universe that walk on legs of bending light. When they touch you, you don't bleed. You just cease to exist. You are unmade. I saw Mrs. Higgins, not the one from my cul-de-sac, but another iteration, maybe Mrs. Higgins' 409 gate stepped on. There was no crunch. She just dissolved into a cloud of binary code and gray ash, scattered instantly by the sulphurous wind. We scrambled over the dunes of fused silica. The landscape was a nightmare of jagged peaks and deep purple canyons. There was no vegetation, no water, just the ruins of a civilization that had died screaming 3 centuries ago. Charlie. The voice was weak. I turned. It was the other me. Iteration 235, the one I had pulled from the tank in Sector 9. He was stumbling, clutching his side. His skin was gray, his eyes flickering with that same digital interference I had seen in Charlie 233 back in the simulation. "We have to stop," he gasped, falling to his knees on the glass. "The signal, it's fading." I grabbed him by the shoulder. "Get up. If we stop, they find us. We need cover." "Cover?" He laughed, a glitching, stuttering sound. "Look around, man. It's a parking lot. It's all a flat, dead parking lot." He was right. But on the horizon, through the swirling dust and the flashes of red lightning, I saw shapes. Rectangles, towers. They were skeletal, stripped of glass and steel, like the rib cages of giant beasts jutting out of the ground. "The city," I said. "We go there." We dragged ourselves toward the ruins. The mob of clones had thinned. What had been an army of thousands pouring out of the airlock was now a scattered, terrified refugee column of maybe a few hundred. We were a pathetic sight. Men in business suits covered in pink amniotic fluid. Women in 1950s, house dresses torn by razor-sharp winds. Soldiers with melted faces clutching useless rifles. We were the ghosts of a suburbia that never existed, walking through the graveyard of the real world. As we neared the city ruins, the sky began to shift. The purple clouds boiled, forming a vortex directly above the facility we had left behind. A beam of pure white light shot up from the bunker, piercing the storm. The director. He must have rebooted the core. He was trying to re-establish the static shield, but it was too late. The observers were already swarming. I watched as one of the colossi straddled the facility, its legs plunging miles deep into the earth. It pulsed with a dark, necrotic energy. The white beam faltered, flickered, and died. The facility was gone. Our womb was crushed. "We're alone," 235 whispered. He was shivering violently now. "No server. No update. We're offline, Charlie." "Good," I said, though I felt the same cold hollowness spreading in my chest. Offline means we're free. We reached the outskirts of the city as night fell. Night on the surface wasn't like the sudden switch-flip darkness of the domes. It was a slow, suffocating suffusion of shadows. The red lightning provided the only illumination, casting strobe-like glimpses of the devastation. We found shelter in the lobby of what used to be a bank. The revolving doors were gone, shattered long ago. The marble floor was cracked, revealing the rusted rebar beneath. But the roof held. It was a cave of concrete and steel. We huddled together for warmth. Body heat was the only resource we had. I sat with my back against a pillar, the stolen rifle across my lap. 235 sat next to me. Across the room, a group of Thomases were arguing in hushed tones about mail routes that didn't exist. A cluster of Trudys were weeping silently, holding each other. "Do you remember?" 235 asked suddenly. "Remember what?" "Before Echo Creek," he said. He was staring at the ceiling, his eyes tracing the patterns of the mold. I have memories, Charlie. Real ones, not the script." "It's just the backstory," I said. "They programmed us with histories to make the fear more authentic." "No," he shook his head. "The backstory is generic. High school football. First heartbreak. Dead parents. This is different. I remember fire. I remember the sky turning red. I remember holding a girl's hand while the real sirens screamed. I looked at him. The glitching in his eyes had stopped. He looked lucid. Painfully lucid. "The old men said we were copies," I said slowly. "He said they downloaded the core personalities from the server. Maybe they didn't scrub the data clean enough. Maybe when the system crashed, the firewalls came down." "I think I was a teacher," 235 whispered. "I think her name was Sarah. I think we died here." He gestured to the ruins around us. A chill that had nothing to do with the wind swept through me. We weren't just random genetic constructs. We were them. We were the people who had lived in this city 300 years ago. We were the echoes of the dead, resurrected to be tortured in a dollhouse for eternity. "Why?" I asked the darkness. "What is the point of preserving us if this is the existence?" "Maybe they hoped," a voice said from the shadows. A figure stepped into the dim light of the lobby. It was a soldier, one of the ones with the plastic faces, but his visor was gone, ripped away. The plastic face was cracked, revealing a human jawbone and wet red muscle underneath. He held a datapad in his armored hand. "They hoped to fix it," the soldier rasped. His voice box was damaged, skipping syllables. "The project, it wasn't originally a farm. It was a simulation engine. They were trying to simulate a timeline where the observers didn't win." I raised the rifle. "Stay back." The soldier raised his hands. "I am Unit 734. I am awake. The network is down. My command protocols are gone." "You were shooting at us an hour ago," I said. "I was running a program," Unit 734 said. Now the program is deleted. I have the archives. I downloaded them from the hub before the collapse. He held out the datapad. It was cracked, glowing with a faint green light. Show me, I said. He tapped the screen. A holographic projection flickered into the air between us. It showed a spinning globe, Earth. But it was green and blue. It was alive. Year 2084, the soldier narrated. First contact. The signal came from the dark sector. We thought it was communication. We answered. The globe on the hologram changed. Purple veins spread across the continents. The blue oceans turned black. It wasn't a language, 234 murmured, watching the display. It was a virus. A memetic hazard. It was a virus. A memetic hazard, the soldier corrected. An idea. A frequency. It infects order. It unravels reality. The observers are the physical manifestation of that signal. They entered our dimension through the cracks we made by listening. The hologram shifted again. It showed the bunkers. Huge underground cities. We hid, the soldier said. We tried to fight back, but conventional weapons don't work on math. You can't shoot an equation. So the original director proposed Project Echo. If the enemy feeds on order, on static reality, we would create a reality of pure chaos, a reality of infinite suffering and fear. We would scream so loud into the void that they wouldn't be able to hear the survivors hiding in the quiet spots. We are chaff, I realized. We are flares thrown out of the back of a jet to distract a missile. Yes, the soldier said. But something changed. The simulation, it evolved. The subjects started remembering. The iterations started talking to each other across the firewalls, like you did. And the observers, I asked, are they still hunting us? The soldier looked toward the shattered entrance of the bank. They are always hunting. And now, we're the loudest things on the planet. As if on cue, a sound tore through the night air. It was a low, vibrating thrum, like a cello string being bowed by a chainsaw. It came from the street outside. The clones in the lobby went silent. The weeping stopped. The arguing stopped. I crawled to the window. In the street below, bathed in the red strobe of the lightning, an observer was walking. It was terrifyingly majestic. It stood taller than the ruins of the skyscrapers. Its legs were needles of black light that pierced the pavement without cracking it. Its body was a shifting cloud of geometry, shapes that hurt the eye to look at triangles, with too many angles, circles that had corners. And hanging from its underbelly, suspended in a web of static, were bodies. Dozens of them, caught like flies. They weren't dead. They were twitching. They were screaming, but no sound came out. The observer was absorbing their frequency. It's searching, 235, whispered beside me. It can smell us. It can smell the glitch. We need to move, I said. We can't stay here. Where? The soldier asked. The wasteland is endless. The bunkers are sealed or destroyed. I looked at the datapad still glowing in his hand. The map, I said. Does it show other facilities? Other echo sites? The soldier scrolled. There were 12 sites originally. Echo Creek was Site 4. Site 1 is in the Himalayas. Site 2 is under the Atlantic. But, wait. He zoomed in on a section of the map. A blinking red dot, not far from our location. Maybe 20 miles north, deep in the ruins of the city center. What is that? I asked. Site 0, the soldier said. The prototype. It's listed as decommissioned. But there's a power signature. Faint, but steady. Site 0, I repeated. Why was it decommissioned? The soldier looked up, his exposed jaw muscle twitching. Because the subjects inside. They didn't just break. They ascended. They adapted to the frequency. They became something else. Something else. The logs are corrupted, the soldier said. But the threat level is marked as Omega, higher than the observers. I looked back at the observer in the street. It was turning. Its sensory array, a cluster of burning stars where a face should be, was sweeping toward the bank. "We don't have a choice," I said. "We go to Site 0. You're trading one monster for another," 235 warned. "I'm trading a spider for a chance," I said. "Gather everyone. We move in the shadows. We move when the lightning strikes. Noise is our enemy now." "I thought you said we should make noise," 235 said. "That was to get out," I replied, checking the magazine of my rifle. "To survive, we have to become the static." We left the bank. We moved like rats through the wreckage of the old world. I took point, with the soldier unit 734 covering the rear. 235 stayed close to me, his memory returning in flashes that nearly crippled him. He would stop at a rusted car and weep, remembering a family trip to the beach. He would touch a crumbling brick wall and recoil, remembering the heat of the bombs. It was a grueling march. We lost people, not to the observers, but to the environment. The air was toxic. The dust clogged our lungs. Some of the clones simply stopped walking, their bodies shutting down, their batteries drained. We had to leave them. There was no time to mourn ghosts. The observer stalked us. It stayed a few blocks away, a towering sentinel of doom. It knew we were there, I was sure of it. It was toying with us, herding us. Or maybe it was afraid of where we were going. As we pushed deeper into the city center, the ruins changed. The buildings weren't just destroyed, they were altered. The steel was twisted into organic shapes. The concrete was covered in a bioluminescent moss that pulsed with a soft blue rhythm. The hum returned. But it wasn't the harsh mechanical hum of Echo Creek. It was melodic. It was a song, a low choral vibration that resonated in my chest. "Do you hear that?" 235 asked. He wasn't shivering anymore. He stood straighter. His gray skin looked flushed with color. "I hear it," I said. "It sounds like home," he finished. We turned a corner and saw it. Site 0. It wasn't a bunker. It was a cathedral. It sat in the center of a massive crater, a towering spire of white metal and crystal that defied the gravity of the dead world. It glowed with a pure, unwavering light that pushed back the purple storm. The blue moss grew thickest here, carpeting the ground leading up to the massive, open doors. Standing in front of the doors were people. They weren't clones. They weren't soldiers. They were tall, luminous beings. They looked human, but perfected. Their skin shone like pearl. Their eyes were pools of liquid gold. They wore robes woven from the blue moss. They were waiting for us. "Welcome, iterations," one of them called out. His voice was the song. It didn't travel through the air. It blossomed inside my mind. "We have been waiting for the cycle to break." I stepped forward, the rifle feeling heavy and barbaric in my hands. "Who are you?" "We are the echo that did not fade," the being said. "We are the signal. We are Site 0. "The soldier said you were a threat," I said. "He said you were dangerous." The being smiled. It was a smile of infinite patience. "To the director, freedom is a threat. To the blind, sight is dangerous. We did not break Charlie Davis. We harmonized. We took the frequency of the observers and we tuned it. We made it our own." He gestured to the sky. The observer that had been stalking us had stopped at the edge of the crater. It was hesitating. Its shadow limbs twitched. It let out a screech of frustration, and then backed away. It couldn't cross the threshold of the blue moss. "They cannot enter," the being said. "Our song disrupts their logic. It is the one thing they cannot eat, Hope." "Hope." I laughed, a bitter rasping sound. "I'm a copy of a dead man, made in a vat of goo, running on trauma and adrenaline. What hope do I have? You are not a copy," the being said. He walked down the crystal steps. He stopped in front of me. He placed a warm, glowing hand on my chest. "The flesh is printed. The mind is downloaded. But the spark? The will to break the glass? That cannot be copied, Charlie. That is yours. You generated it. You are the first new soul this world has seen in 300 years. He looked at 235. He looked at the soldier. He looked at the ragged group of survivors. Come inside, he said. The air is clean. The water is pure. We have much to do. The earth is dead, yes, but seeds grow best in ash. I looked back at the wasteland, at the dark, swirling storm, at the retreating monsters. Then I looked at the cathedral of light. I dropped the rifle. It clattered on the crystal steps. My name is Charlie, I said. We know, the being replied. Welcome home, Charlie. I walked up the steps. I crossed the threshold. And for the first time since the broadcast interrupted my life, the static in my head finally, truly cleared. But as the massive crystal doors began to close behind us, sealing us into the light, I saw something. Out in the darkness, beyond the crater, in the shadows of the ruins, a figure was watching. It wasn't an observer. It wasn't a clone. It was an old man in a tattered white suit. The director. He had survived the fall. He was broken, bleeding, dragging a twisted leg behind him. He looked up at the cathedral, his eyes burning with a hate that was hotter than the sun. He pulled a device from his pocket. A radio. An old, blocky walkie-talkie. He pressed it to his lips. Phase 3. I saw him mouth the words. Initiate Phase 3. The crystal doors shut with a booming finality. The song swelled, drowning out the world. I was safe. I was in paradise. But deep down, in the base of my skull, a new sound began. Faint. Almost imperceptible. Tick, tick, tick. It wasn't a hum. It was a countdown. The broadcast hadn't ended. We had just changed the channel. The cathedral was not a building in the way I understood architecture. It was a living organism. The walls breathed, expanding and contracting with the slow bioluminescent rhythm that matched the song, resonating in my chest. The air was sweet, smelling of ozone and petrichor, erasing the copper taste of blood and the sulfur stench of the wasteland. Inside, the light was everywhere. It didn't come from lamps or windows. It emanated from the moss, from the crystal pillars, from the skin of the ascended themselves. They moved around us, the ragged survivors of Project Echo, offering bowls of clear water and strange, tasteless gray cakes that somehow made the hunger pangs vanish instantly. We were safe. We were in the eye of the storm, but I couldn't hear the song anymore. Not really. It was drowned out by the metronome in my skull. Tick, tick. It was a wet sound, like a clock counting down underwater. It was precise, one beat every second, and with every beat a spike of cold pain drove itself into the base of my neck. I sat on a bench carved from a single piece of white quartz. Next to me, Charlie 235 was sleeping. It was the first time I had seen him sleep without twitching or whimpering. His face was peaceful. The glitching in his skin had stopped. The environment of Site Zero was stabilizing him, rewriting his corrupted code with its own perfect harmony. Unit 734, the plastic-faced soldier, stood guard near a pillar. He didn't sleep. He couldn't. He just watched the Ascendant with a mix of awe and deep, ingrained paranoia. "You are vibrating," a voice said. I looked up. One of the Ascendant was standing over me. She was tall, her skin shimmering like mother of pearl. Her eyes were solid gold, lacking pupils or whites. She didn't have a name tag, but the others deferred to her. "I'm fine," I lied. The ticking was so loud I thought she must be able to hear it. "You are dissonant," she corrected gently. She reached out a hand. Her fingers were long, delicate. She touched my forehead. "There is a noise in you, a static that does not belong to the echo." Her touch was cool, but it burned. The moment her skin made contact with mine, the ticking stopped. For a second, there was silence. Blissful, golden silence. Blissful, golden silence. And then the voice spoke. Not in my head. from my mouth. Connection established. It wasn't my voice. It was the director's. Dry, rasping, mocking. I clamped my hands over my mouth, terrified. I tried to stand up, to back away, but my legs wouldn't work. I was paralyzed. My body was no longer my own. It was a receiver, and the broadcast had just gone live. The Ascended woman recoiled, her golden eyes widening. What are you? My mouth opened against my will. My jaw unhinged with a sickening pop. Phase 3, my voice said. Trojan protocol initiated. A wave of black force erupted from me. It wasn't an explosion of fire. It was a shockwave of anti-sound, a pulse of pure concentrated silence that slammed into the Ascended woman. She didn't scream. She shattered. Her pearl-like skin cracked like porcelain. The golden light in her eyes went out. She crumbled into a pile of gray dust and blue moss, blown apart by the force of the void I had just unleashed. The song in the cathedral faltered. The rhythm broke. The lights flickered. The bioluminescence dimmed, turning from a soothing blue to a sickly, rotting green. Charlie, 235, woke up screaming. He scrambled back, staring at me. What's happening? What are you doing? I can't stop it, I yelled, but my voice was layered with the director's laughter. He's inside me. He's using the printer code. Unit 734 raised his rifle. Hostile detected. Subject 234 has been compromised. Don't shoot! 235 shouted, jumping in front of me. It's not him, it's the signal. The cathedral fell into chaos. The other clones, the Thomases and Trudys who had finally found peace, began to scream. The Ascended rushed toward us, their faces masks of serene confusion turning to horror as the black pulse emanating from me began to corrode the very walls of their sanctuary. Target the spire, the director's voice commanded to my lips. Corrupt the frequency. My body moved. I stood up. I began to walk toward the center of the cathedral, toward the massive crystal spire that anchored the song. I tried to stop. I fought every muscle. I screamed internally, begging my legs to halt, but I was a passenger in a car speeding off a cliff. Stop him, an Ascended shouted. He is carrying the silence. They charged. Luminous beings moving with the speed of thought. But as they got close, the field around me lashed out. Tendrils of black static whipped from my skin, striking them down. They dissolved on contact, their harmony unraveled by my dissonance. I was killing them. I was destroying the only hope the world had left. Unit 734 fired. The bullet hit me in the shoulder. It punched through the flesh, spinning me around. Pain, hot and white, exploded in my arm. But I didn't fall. The black static knit the wound together in seconds. The bullet was pushed out, clattering to the floor. Indestructible, the director gloated through me. Phase 3 utilizes observer's geometry. You cannot kill a void. I turned back to the spire. I was 20 feet away, 10 feet. Charlie, listen to me. 235 grabbed my arm. His hands burned on my skin, but he held on. You are the glitch. You broke the dome. You can break this. I can't. I wailed, my voice cracking under the weight of the director's presence. He's too strong. He's code. 235 yelled. He's just a script. You are the writer now. Remember the basement. Remember the crowbar, the basement, the wall, the realization that my reality was thin, fake, breakable. I looked at the spire. It wasn't just a crystal, it was an antenna. It was broadcasting the song. Touch it, the director commanded. Infect it. I reached out my hand. My fingertips brushed the cold humming surface of the crystal. Black veins shot up the spire. The white light turned purple. The song warped, twisting into a discordant screech that sounded like metal tearing. Outside, the storm roared. The blue moss withered. The barrier fell. Boom! The massive front doors of the cathedral were blown inward. They were here, the observers, 3 of them. Colossal geometric nightmares squeezing through the entrance, their shadow limbs tearing at the sacred architecture. They shrieked in triumph, a sound that made the clones fall to their knees, clutching their bleeding ears. They swarmed into the sanctuary. They snatched up the Ascended, feeding on their light. They stomped on the refugees. It was a slaughter, a massacre in paradise. Mission accomplished, the director whispered through me. Retrieval teams inbound. Then he let me go. My body went limp. I collapsed onto the quartz floor. The connection severed. I gasped for air, my mind reeling, the guilt crashing down on me heavier than the ceiling of the dome. I had done this. I was the key. I was the bong. Charlie, 235 dragged me up. We have to go. We have to move. Let me die, I sobbed. I killed them. I killed them all. Not all of them, Unit 734 said. He was beside us, firing wildly at the encroaching shadows. The spire has a lower level, the crypts. The original server room. Run, 235 pulled me. We ran past the dying spire. We ran past the dissolving bodies of the angels who had tried to save us. We found a small, hidden door behind the altar. Unit 734 blew the lock with a precise shot. We stumbled into darkness. A spiral staircase wound down into the earth. We descended. Above us, the sounds of the massacre grew distant, muffled by the stone. But the shaking didn't stop. The observers were tearing the cathedral apart from the foundations. We reached the bottom. It was a cold, circular chamber filled with humming machinery. Not the modern, sleek tech of the director's facility. This was old. Ancient. Vacuum tubes and spinning tape reels. Analog technology. What is this? I asked, wiping the blood from my mouth. The Ark, Unit 734 said. He walked to a console. This is Site Zero's core. It's not connected to the network. That's why the director couldn't hack it remotely. That's why he needed you to physically infect the spire. So we're safe here? 235 asked. No, the soldier shook his head. The spire is corrupted. The shield is down. It's only a matter of time before they dig us out. He looked at me. His plastic face was scorched, his human jaw set in a grim line. But there is a failsafe. A bomb? I asked hopefully. A bomb? I asked hopefully. A broadcast, he said. The original signal. The one Earth sent out in 2084. The one that attracted them. Why would we want to send that? 235 asked. That started the apocalypse, because it calls them, Unit 734 said. All of them. If we amplify it, if we turn the gain up to infinity, it acts like a dog whistle. It draws every observer on the planet to one location. Here, I realized. It draws them here. Yes, the soldier said. And once they are here, concentrated in one spot, we overload the geothermal tap beneath the facility. We trigger a volcanic event. We blow the crust. We destroy Site Zero, I said. And us. And the director's army, Unit 734 added. And a significant portion of the enemy swarm. It was a suicide pact. A final act of defiance. Do it, I said. Wait, 235 said. He was looking at the tape reels. If we send the signal, who hears it? Just the monsters. Everyone, the soldier said. Every radio, every TV, every implant, global saturation. 235 looked at me. Charlie, the clones, the ones still in the tanks, the ones in the other domes. If we broadcast, we can talk to them. Talk to them. We can wake them up, 235 said. His eyes were burning with a desperate idea. The director used the containment failed message to scare them, to keep them docile. What if we send a different message? What message? The truth, 235 said. We tell them they are simulations. We tell them how to break the glass. We create an army not of thousands but of millions. We light a fire in every bunker across the planet. I looked at the ancient microphone on the console. It was dusty. If we do that, I said, the director will panic. He'll try to purge the system. Let him try, Unit 734 said. He can't purge everyone at once, not if they all wake up together. The ceiling shook. Dust rained down. A crack appeared in the stone wall. A shadow limb poked through, searching. "We don't have much time," the soldier said. He began flipping switches. The vacuum tubes glowed orange. The hum returned, not the melody of the Ascended, but a raw electric power. "Get on the mic," 235 told me. "You're the voice. You're the one he used. Use it back." I walked to the console. I picked up the heavy metal microphone. It felt real. Solid. "Is it ready?" I asked. "Transmitting in 3, the soldier said. 2, 1. A red light blinked on. I took a breath. I thought about Mrs. Higgins pruning her wire roses. I thought about Thomas with his broken fingers. I thought about the man freezing in the Alpine Dome. "This is not a test," I said. My voice echoed in the small room, but I knew it was being carried on waves of invisible energy, bouncing off satellites, piercing miles of rock and steel. "This is not a test. My name is Charlie Davis. I'm Iteration 234. And I am speaking to everyone who hears a hum in their teeth." Above us, the tearing sound stopped. The observers had heard it. "Do not seek shelter," I continued. "Shelter is a lie. The sky is a screen. You neighbors are wardens. You are sleeping in a burning house." I looked at 235. He nodded. "Wake up," I said. "Look at the windows. Break the glass. Find the door in the basement. They are afraid of you. They are afraid of your noise." I leaned closer to the mic. "Scream," I whispered. "Scream until the walls come down." The soldier slammed a lever down. The room lurched. A siren began to wail, not the morning wake-up call, but a true, catastrophic alarm. The geothermal pressure was building. "It's done," Unit 734 said. "The core is critical. 5 minutes. 5 minutes to what?" I asked. "To detonation." We sat on the floor. There was nothing left to run to. "You think they heard it?" 235 asked. I closed my eyes. And for a moment, beneath the rumbling of the earth and the shrieking of the monsters above, I felt something. It wasn't a sound. It was a feeling. A vibration. It started faint, like ripples in a pond. Then it grew. It multiplied. One consciousness waking up. Then 10. Then 10. Then 10,000. I felt the panic of a woman in a desert dome realizing the sand was glass. I felt the rage of a soldier in a jungle realizing his gun was a toy. I felt the collective psychic scream of a million souls snapping their strings at the same time. It was deafening. It was beautiful. "They heard it," I said. The wall crumbled. The ceiling gave way. The massive, starry face of an observer filled the room, its mandibles clicking, its presence freezing the air in my lungs. But it didn't matter. I looked at the creature. I smiled. "You're too late," I told it. The broadcast is everywhere. The world turned white. Static. Long. Low static. Then a click. "Hello. Is this thing on?" The voice is young. A girl's voice. "My name is..." I don't know my name. But I found a radio. I heard the men. I heard Charlie. Background noise. Wind. The sound of glass crunching underfoot. I broke the window. I climbed out. The sky. The real sky. It's terrible. It's purple and scary. But it's real. A pause. "There are others here. We are walking. We don't know where to go. But we found a map. It says Site 0. It's a crater now. A big, smoking crater. But there's something growing in the middle of it. Rustling sound. It's blue moss. And flowers, real flowers. They're growing out of the ash. We're going to plant more." Click.